Elections expected before the end of the year, the governing ANC faces a myriad of challenges in a number of provinces, as you just saw there in KZN, the Northwest, the Eastern Cape and the Free State. And after losing key metros in the local government elections, less than 2 years ago, we asked the question tonight, what is its state of readiness in the Gauteng Province, the engine of the South African economy, and how does it repair the damage elsewhere? We're joined by political analyst Dumisani Hlophe for an in-studio discussion. Good evening to you and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Even just looking at that package, so much for the instruction to members of the ANC not to take the party to court. That's not panning out so well, is it?
Not necessarily, but the interesting thing is that the more you have got these squabbles throughout the country within the ANC branches, perhaps it's not necessarily bad, because there will always be differences internally within parties, and it's not even limited to the ANC. If you look at the DA and other political parties, they've got their own intra, tension. But here's the challenge, Bongan. The challenge is that it only becomes a crisis if the leadership at the national level fails to solve the problem. But if the leadership nationally is able to stand up and deal with issues in Mafikeng and KZN and elsewhere, and then it cements its authority, its legitimacy, and it makes it easy for them to run the party.
That's the ideal picture that you're presenting there, but in a number of situations we haven't seen it happening exactly like that. But let's take a broader picture first. I mean, if you use the analogy of a patient, for example, how sick is this one?
How sick? I don't think it's a bit of a flu. And if you understand the flu, sometimes it's a cleansing process, it's a self-healing. But you see, in each and every organization, whether it's political parties, churches, or any organization, there are always differences. The challenge that people make, that fail to make, is not necessarily to wish the differences away, but it's the ability to manage those differences.
Well, you're calling it a flu. Some might call it perhaps the Spanish influenza, and we know what that did around the world. Let's go case by case now. If you look at the Northwest, for example, let's start there. I mean, that's a province effectively in rebellion.
Well, it's in rebellion. That is at an organizational level, the ANC.
PEC, certainly. I mean, that's why we've seen the steps
it is,
that national leadership has had to take.
It is rebellious at an organizational level, but it is also dysfunctional at the government level. I think at the government level, it has collapsed. So this is why the ANC is trying to tackle these issues at two levels.
Some would say that that's disingenuous, because we've seen that dysfunction for quite some time now, but they're only intervening with the strong actions they've taken recently because the PEC at a provincial level, at a political level, is not listening to the national leadership.
Look, that was a serious poor timing, by the way. It was seriously unstrategic for the PEC to try to go against the NEC. Partly because this NEC is just starting. It's not even a year old, so still has got 5 years. It's got more power, it's got more strength, and that PEC is about to leave, I think within a year or so, if I'm not mistaken. So it was a serious mistake that they did. And if I'm not mistaken, there was an apology to that regard. But I think it was a serious poor timing for the PEC to try to challenge the ANC nationally.
Well, let's look at the Free State, for example. People are saying that look no further than that province to see a crisis very similar to what we've seen in the Northwest in the coming months. We know KZN remains unstable, and in my introduction I referred to Gauteng. Paul Mashatile might be out of the way. We've seen Premier Makura survive a motion of no confidence yesterday. How long does he stay? I mean, you say it's just flu, but all these provinces are indications of very big problems. The Eastern Cape is also, facing its own troubles.
But remember, Bongan, I said at the beginning that these differences, these tensions are not necessarily bad. They only become a crisis if the national leadership fails to solve them out. And this type of differences, they will always exist. I mean,
but is national leadership dealing with them? I mean, we've seen the instruction not to take the party to court. It's happening in KZN, and it's likely to happen in the other provinces. So Is there
But you see, that's the irony of organizational growth, Bongan. Unless you have got tensions within the organization will not grow. Scientifically, even medication grows because from time to time people find something new. So this is why I'm saying these differences, these tensions that exist within the ANC can even refer to the DA element in the Cape Town. They are not necessarily immune to organization, but it depends on how they are managed. If they are managed properly by the national leadership, then they serve as the basis for growth. They only become crises if the national leadership fails to manage them.
Well, there are those who would say that despite all the problems the governing party is facing, it is served by a number of own goals being scored by opposition parties. Thank you very much for your analysis and your insights this evening. That was, of course, political analyst Dumisani Hlophe. Stay with us. We've got more for you after this quick break.